Welcome back to another episode of Let's Get Unreal, where I'm recreating the island from Lost in Unreal Engine 5. It's Brant, not Brent here, and today I'm going to be adding some materials to the landscapes. You're not going to want to miss this. So when we last left the island, we had just imported our mountain terrain from World Creator 2023. And it's looking pretty good, but hey, where's the materials? Where's the textures? So today we're going to be taking the very important step of adding an auto landscape material to both landscapes. I'm going to tell you guys right now, I don't need to create a landscape auto material from scratch. For one, it's probably too time consuming. And two, I don't even know how to do that yet, so I'm still learning. But there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. I'm all about working with the best tools available to me to give me the best results that I can get. So with that said, I'm just going to be using Unreal Sensei's auto landscape material. It works for everything I want to do here, and I can just repurpose it and re-plug in all the different materials for the island. If you think you like it and you want to use it, go to his YouTube page and check it out. It's a free download. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is go over to the materials in the landscape folder and browse to the material, and for some reason you have to set the parameters for the global materials first. I'm not sure exactly why you have to do this, but in order to enable it on the material instance later, you got to set some materials here. So what we want to do first now is go over to Quixel Bridge and start looking for the main material for the mountains. And I want to do like a grass. So I know there's a bunch of different kinds of grass, but none of them are really looking as realistic as I wanted. And funny enough, the one that looked the most realistic to me, that looked good on the mountains and the rest of the terrain, was an artificial turf. Yeah, I know that might seem weird that we're going to use that, but that just looked really good from a distance and when we got up close. Now, remember that this isn't going to be the main part we're seeing. Okay, this is likely going to be the underneath, so like the bottom layer of the landscape. So keep that in mind. This is going to be underneath a lot of the foliage and trees and plants and that kind of stuff. Okay, so now we're going to want to drag the materials over into the slots. You have the main color, the normal. Then you're also going to want to check this mask button, mask A, for this being the A material. And for some reason, I'll show you here in a second, we got to double click and open this material up. It has 3 different channels and we only want the green channel here. Okay, so I don't know why, but that's just from the tutorials I've seen. I think the green channel is like the the ambient occlusion channel. So I think this looks good. I think this kind of matches the look and feel of the island. If you go back and rewatch the show or look at pictures from Oahu or places in Hawaii, this color really matches the island of what it looks like in the background. The next thing you're going to want to do is create a material instance of that auto landscape material, and that's going to be so we don't do anything bad or harm the original material. And this is just an instance of it, so we can make all the changes from the instance from here on out. Okay, then we drag the material instance onto landscape number 2. That's the mountains. So then if you give it a second, you'll see that everything turns black here. And that's going to work like that for anytime you apply an auto landscape material. Doesn't matter what the materials are, for some reason it just turns black. And to fix that, then what you do is you go into landscape mode and go to paint and go to the auto landscape material on top, and you create a weight based layer. Okay, and when you do that, you're going to see, watch, it's going to pop in. Yep, there you go. So you can see this is the start of our landscape material now. But you can see the big issue is we have the green grass that we picked, the auto material on the bottom, and the rest is rocks. And we obviously don't want that. So like I said, if you're watching the show or if you've ever been to Hawaii, you'll know that these mountains, these mountainous ranges in the background of the show and on the island are totally green. Like you can't see any cliffs or rocks really at all. It's just all green moss or vegetation. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to change this setting here to make everything green, not just the bottom parts. And you do this by changing the Z fall off amount. So you can see it was set at a 2, and when we change it to a 1, it's going to make about half of the mountain green. Well, not half, but more of it green. But then when you change it to 0, the entire thing turns green, and that's what we want. So I just set it all the way to 0, and that basically takes the first material A that we made, and it covers the entire landscape in that material, and that's what we want for now. Another really cool thing about Unreal Sensei's auto landscape material is that it gives you a bunch of different options to do stuff like these cell bombing, and I'm not sure exactly what it does, the technical part of it, but I know it makes it so the texture doesn't look tiled. And we can turn that on for all the textures that we make. So I just turned that on for this one. It doesn't really make much of a difference here, but you'll notice it later in the sand. And then I also want to kind of mess with the tint just a little bit, so we can make it just a little bit darker. I don't think it's on the actual island it's that bright green, so we'll just make the green a little bit darker here. And I'll just kind of go over and get a close-up look at it. And like I said, this is artificial grass, but you can see, you can't even tell that that's what it is. It just looks like this almost green moss, or kind of undercoating or underlayer of like a forest or tropical forest area. So that's really cool. I also, let's see, I decreased it a little bit and I changed the normal up to 5 to kind of give it more of a shadowy look, as you can see. So it kind of just gives it a more realistic texture by setting the normal. And I think that looks good now for the mountains. Like this level of green is kind of what I want to see in the background, or what would go underneath the foliage or other trees and plants. So I think it's time that we move on to the next landscape, which is landscape 1, the original landscape, and that was the landscape of the island. So I'm going to go into the landmass all folder and click on landscape, and we're going to drag the same material instance now over to that landscape. So yes, we're going to be using the same material instance on both landscapes, and you should see the same exact thing should happen. It happens here. It turns black just like before, and then we're going to need to go over to the landscape mode and go to paint, and then set that weight, go to click on create layer info and create the weight blended layer again. Okay, and then once we do that, it should pop right in. And just so you know, you have to add a 2 onto the end of that or it won't work, because you need to have 2 separate layers. Okay, so here we go. We have everything just the way we want it, right? Everything is artificial turf. No, I'm just playing, but from here, we're going to go look into start adding the sand materials. Okay, so we're going to go back to Quixel Bridge and we're going to search for sand. And of course, we're going to want to go to beach once we get here, because we are, in fact, after all, we are adding beach sand. Okay, so there's going to be all different kinds of beach sands here. Lots of different stuff. Lots of it looks realistic. Some doesn't look as realistic, but I really like the Thai beach sand. So I wanted to pick couple different Thai beach sands and add them to our scene, so that way I'll have a few choices. But the Thai wet beach sand works really well, and then there's another Thai wet beach sand. I think there's a couple of just the regular Thai sands that have like footprints in them that worked really well. So I also wanted to make sure I went back and favorited these if we want to go back to them to change something in the future, or just to have them again if we want to get them for another project. Okay, so once we're done exporting all the individual sands and adding them to our project, we're going to want to go and add them now to the auto landscape material. And we're going to kind of just follow the same procedure that we did before, but the big difference is for the artificial turf, we put that as material A, and here we're going to want to start working kind of more strategically. So material E is going to be the very bottom material, and if you think about it, I want the bottom material here to be the wet sand, because that's going to be kind of what everything's on top. That's going to be the material that starts at the lowest elevation. So I'm going to drag all the materials over and then basically apply the same set of settings that we had done for the artificial grass. That means we have to go through and add that mask layer for the ambient occlusion. We have to turn off the different channels, make sure we save everything. And now we should have the wet sand loaded into the material E slot. Now here's where the really cool part of the auto landscape material comes into play. When you turn on the bottom material, look what happens. It changes the very bottom layer of this into the wet sand material. Okay, so look at that. But you'll notice there's a pretty distinct line of where it begins and ends. Another issue we're seeing here, look how the material looks like it's like you're on the surface of the moon. You see all these craters and weird things of the textures. Now this took me a pretty long time to figure out how to fix it, but if you go over here into the Z variation, there is a area here called macro variation, and when you set that to 0, you can see the texture and the material goes back to the way it's supposed to be. Now if you look closely, you'll see that it's still tiled. That's because we haven't set up the cell bombing yet. So once we turn on the cell bombing, now we have a normal looking wet sand material, and you can see up close that this looks pretty good, but it might be a little bit too big. So I think this would be a good time to add in a mannequin to kind of compare to what his feet look like, to compare it to if there's any footprints, or just how the material should look up to a normal size looking character. Yeah, let's go ahead and change that from a 1. We'll take that all the way down to a 0.3 or 0.5. I think think 0.3 will be good. I think that looks pretty realistic compared to the mannequin. So the next step now is going to be to go into this bottom layer setting here and start adjusting it to where we want the wet sand to end and where we want the other material to begin. Now I know already that the number is 1700, but you're going to probably have to play with that to get it perfect. But this will take it right up to where the waves end up crashing on the shore. And now from here, we can kind of adjust this number and feather it to get it looking exactly where we want it. Another one of the really great things about using the auto landscape material is that when we feather this here, this is going to create like really nice blend into the next material, which is going to be the dry sand. But another benefit on top of that is that it creates kind of like this limit for the dry sand. When we paint it, it's never going to be able to accidentally go into the wet sand area. So it's only going to be able to go, you know, on the right side of the shore where the water is not. So it's never going to be able to go into the wet sand. It only stays on the other side. So that's a really cool feature. Now we're going to be adding the dry sand into the D slot. This goes into the D slot because the E is for the wet sand and that goes below D. Okay. So once we add the D slot, we add all of the materials into it just like we did the other slots, and we have to go back and adjust the ambient occlusion channel for the mask material, and everything should just be set up the same way as the other materials. But now instead of setting it up for a bottom layer, what we're going to do is go to the landscape 1. We are going to paint this with the landscape tool. So for the dry sand, we can start painting, and this is how we're going to create the beach. And look at that, you can already see how well these materials are blending together. Look at how realistic this Thai beach sand looks, and look at how the wet sand is just blending right into the dry sand. That's exactly what we wanted. So now we can turn on the cell bombing. This should deal with the tiling, and we can also go look to see at the size, match it up with the mannequin's feet. Maybe we want to make it a little bit bigger, so we can drop it down to 0.3. That looks like it's lining up now. It's more realistic. That looks good, but let me just move the mannequin over here a little bit more into the sand so we can kind of try to match up these footprints a little better with the trampled sand. But overall, I think this is looking pretty good, and we can just move on now to the next step, which is just going to be, you know, painting the beach on this entire coastline area to create the beach scene where the survivors of Oceanic Flight 815 have set up camp and where most of the show takes place. So now that we're happy with the sand, I'm just going to speed up the rest of this video. So I'll show you where I'm painting it along the beach. And remember, keep in mind that, you know, we can always go back and change this later, because this doesn't have to be perfect. If we do end up, you know, painting too much sand in one area, we can just go and paint back with the auto landscape material. We'll just go back and paint the artificial grass layer to even it out where we didn't want it, or to fix any mistakes. And I'll show you that right here. See how I go back and just fix it? So it's super simple. It blends really well. And I think overall the sand is looking really, really good. So thanks for sticking with me on this one, guys. I know this one kind of got a little more technical than maybe I would have liked it to be. So hopefully this was just as exciting for you as the other videos, but I do want to tell you we have a lot more exciting videos to come in this series. You know, we're going to start working on building more of the beach in the next video, and then after that we're going to get into the foliage, and we're going to do lots of the trees and plants, and then we're going to start doing the plane crash. So it's going to be really fun, really exciting. And one last things I want to do here is I want to kind of do a real quick playthrough. So I'm going to hit play and show you guys what this looks like in game. But before I do that, I want to give another thanks out just to everyone who watches. I really appreciate all your support, all your views and likes. So please join me again for the next episode of Let's Get Unreal, and I'll see you next time.